Welcome, everybody. Tonight's session, I want us to still rather take pause as we go through the book of Revelation, and Revelation 12 is a good place to take pause so we can understand the players in advance before we go beyond Revelation 12, and also make connections to the book of Daniel that we studied. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do a preview of the players involved, not only in the book of Revelation, but also in the book of Daniel. And that's actually going to make it to where we can proceed more quickly through the upcoming chapters, because we're going to have an idea of who the dragon is, who are these beasts, and who are the living creatures. We will see the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, crowned with 12 stars. We know she gives birth to the man-child who is caught up to the throne room of Elohim. We will see the evil dragon, which is Satan. Then later we will see the four beasts and the little horn from the book of Daniel coalesce into two beasts in Revelation 13, and then ultimately into one beast in Revelation 17. Though there seems to be many parts to this puzzle, ultimately it is the Babylonian Beast Man rising against Yahusha's one new man. These equate to Esau, the red hairy beast man ruled by the synagogue of Satan, and Israel, born from above. The battle between good and evil prophetically culminates in the book of Revelation with victory by the Conqueror and King of Kings, Yahusha HaMashiach. Now, as we went through chapter 9 and through 11, we never did listen to the animated reading of those chapters, and I thought that would be a good recap. And also I included Revelation chapter 12. So just enjoy this animated reading, and then we'll resume.
And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green plant, or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon.
The first woe has passed. Behold, 2 woes are still to come.
Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet,
"Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates."
So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And this is how I saw the horses in my vision, and those who rode them. They wore breastplates the color of fire and of sapphire and of sulfur, And the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these 3 plagues 1/3 of mankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. The rest of mankind, who were not killed by these plagues, did not repent of the works of their hands, nor give up worshipping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He had a little scroll open in his hand. And he set his right foot on the sea, and his left foot on the land, and called out with a loud voice like a lion roaring. When he called out, the 7 thunders sounded. And when the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write. But I heard a voice from heaven saying,
Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down.
And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay, but that in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel, the mystery of God would be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying,
Go, take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land.
So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me,
Take and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey.
And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And I was told,
You must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings.
Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told,
Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone would harm them, fire pours from their mouth and consumes their foes. If anyone would harm them, this is how he is doomed to be killed. They have the power to shut the sky that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from the peoples and tribes and languages and nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents, because these 2 prophets had been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. But after the 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them,
Come up here.
And they went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies watched them. And at that hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven.
The second woe has passed. Behold, the third woe is soon to come.
Then the seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying,
The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever.
And the 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshipped God, saying,
We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations raged, but your wrath came, and the time for the dead to be judged, and for rewarding your servants, the prophets and saints, and those who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying the destroyers of the earth.
Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant was seen within his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and heavy hail. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying,
Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short.
And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nursed for a time, and times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman, and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God, and hold to the testimony of Jesus.
Before we continue, I want us to first review a few definitions from our Daniel study. That is defining a beast kingdom and a beast king. I think those two definitions are very important, and they were brought forth by Kimberly Rogers Brown, and I found them very beneficial. They are simple definitions, but they are very important to remember. So these definitions will help us discern and narrow the field of the possible candidates to consider when identifying beast nations and kings. Otherwise, you can be all over the map. So a beast kingdom is a foreign nation that has conquered and occupied that territory of Jerusalem. And a biblical beast can also be a man, as we saw with Nebuchadnezzar being a beast king. But we also saw Nebuchadnezzar turn around his life pretty much. So who knows? We may see him in heaven one day. By now, we are well aware that Satan counterfeits everything. And I think it's very important for us to remember that there are two tracks that can be traced through the Bible from beginning to end. We must not forget this, because we can get so distracted by the abundance of evil all around us in this fallen world that we forget our Savior is all powerful. So the two tracks are this: the track of righteousness and the track of evil, unrighteousness. And there's really no middle ground. Though Eve was deceived by Satan in the garden, Yahweh already had his plan of redemption in place. We know this because scripture tells us that Yahusha was slain before the foundation of the earth. From Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4, from 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 20, and from Revelation chapter 13, verse 8. The book of Revelation reveals this final showdown that prophetically must take place. But the war has already been won by Yahusha HaMashiach, our high priest, after the order of Melchizedek. So what I have before you is something we reviewed before in the Daniel study. To the left, you have Nebuchadnezzar's statue. That represents Esau's beast man. And then to the right, you have temple man, or the metallic Messiah, that is reflected by the tabernacle in the wilderness and by the temples, how they were built, how they were structured, reflected the one new man, the metallic Messiah, with Yahusha as the head and we as the body. So with Satan, a counterfeit, he's got the beast man rising, and Yahweh is coalescing the final remnant of Israel, born from above, the one new man. So this website, templesecrets.info, is totally awesome. He's done a great job with these diagrams and references to all the scriptures. So the illustration at the right shows how the metals of the temple's interior reveal the metallic Messiah. But how do we know the interior metals have this secondary meaning? He goes on to say, because their type and order parallel those of King Nebuchadnezzar's metal statue to the left, which itself symbolizes an unholy, secular, messianic world ruler, an anti-Messiah. For the interior gold plating of the temple's Holy of Holies, the holy place, and the porch, he references 1 Kings chapter 6 and also 2 Chronicles chapter 3. For the bronze furniture outside, he references 1 Kings chapter 7 and 2 Chronicles chapter 4. This gives the metallic Messiah a head, torso, and pelvis of gold, but hands, feet, legs of bronze. His silver shoulders and arms relate to the silver-plated walls, houses, or buildings, the priestly cells reviewed in 1 Chronicles chapter 29. So this Esau beast man is manifesting, and we see it manifest more when we reach Revelation 17. And we've read about the manifestation of the one new man, also depicted by the wilderness encampments of the four living creatures. And these four living creatures also have appeared to us in Revelation chapter 4 and 5. These were the encampments in the wilderness around the dwelling place. And the four gospels also reflect Yahusha, and those four gospel messages also reflect Yahusha as the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle. The same four lead banners existed in the wilderness encampments, and those lead banners were 4 out of the 12 tribes, and those lead banners were raised, and that's how they knew how to move out in an orderly fashion. Those 4 lead banners were Judah, Reuben, Ephraim, and Dan. So we shouldn't be confused when Israel born from above is reflected by animals, because these are living creatures, whereas the beast man rising, those are chimeras. This goes all the way back to Genesis 25. In verse 23, we read, and Yahweh said to Rebekah, that was Isaac's wife, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older serve the younger. And when the days were filled for her to give birth, and see, twins were in her womb. And the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment. So they called his name Esau. And afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Yaakov, Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So we have the beast man and beast kingdom rising, reflective of Esau, mystery Babylon. And we have Israel, the one new man, reflected by the 4 living creatures that encompass all 12 tribes, because there were 4 quadrants, 3 tribes each. That is Yahweh's kingdom, and Yahusha is our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, all must enter through the door. Yahusha stands at the door and knocks. If anyone opens the door to him, he can be saved. In John 10, verse 9, we read, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. So there is hope for those that are still living in the world, living under Satan's reign, to repent with a sincere heart, seek Yahusha and receive him as their savior and enter through the door. Everyone must go through the door. It's, no one comes to the Father except through the Son. You must be washed by the blood of the Lamb. So that is, in essence, the diagram that is taking place in the book of Revelation. In Genesis 32:28, we read, and he said, your name is no longer Jacob, but Israel. That right there is the birthing of Israel, because you have striven with Elohim and with men and have overcome. Through Jacob, we will see that he has the 12 patriarchs, which become the 12 tribes of Israel. The covenant of promise came through Abraham, Isaac, and later Jacob, Israel, which can be verified in the following scripture to your left in Genesis 17. It says, and Abraham said to Elohim, oh, let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, no. Sarah, your wife, is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I shall bless him and shall make him fruitful and greatly increase him. He is to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. But my covenant I established with Isaac, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this appointed time next year. So as we proceed, we need to remember that Abraham had children by Hagar, because he had Ishmael by Hagar, Sarah, and later Keturah. Therefore, it is important to note that the covenant of promise would be conceived with his wife Sarah, as Abraham's seed would pass through Abraham's recently flayed, circumcised flesh. Yahweh clearly states in Genesis 17:21, my covenant I established with Isaac, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this appointed time next year. So it was at that time in Genesis 17 that Abraham circumcised himself at age 99, and he circumcised Ishmael, who was 13 years of age at the time. So the diagram in front of you is a diagram we used during the Daniel study. And I'm reviewing this mainly to note, let me get the pointer, that it's so very important that we know that Yahweh gave the scepter to Adam to take dominion over the earth. We know that power to rule was seized by Satan. But I want us to be very, 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 very much aware that Adam was the first preacher of righteousness. And so there was a righteous line building up the one new man right at the very beginning. Just as the power to rule that was seized by Satan started building the beast man. So we know that Esau had also crossed over and married into the line of the Ishmaelites. And so he sold his birthright. Never sell your birthright. So here on the beast man side, we studied in Daniel how it was passed down through Nimrod of Babel. And then in the book of Daniel, it talks about the Nebuchadnezzar statue with the head of gold, Babylon, the silver chest and arms, Medo-Persia, the bronze, Greece, and the two legs, Rome. And it's also important to note that there's two iron legs. And we know that the west leg, if you will, pretty much stayed with the papal system. And the east leg began totally connected to Rome, pagan Rome, and it was called the Byzantine Empire, but eventually it became the Ottoman Empire. And then the Ottoman Empire was ended, and the Balfour Declaration was signed, and so forth and so on. And now we have Turkey as the country, and now we have Israel in the land, Israel, the UN sanctioned Israel in the land. And we are presently in the 2 feet of iron and clay. But we note that Rome is represented by the iron, and we know that the iron exists all the way down to the toes. So Rome and the papal system will very much be a part of Mystery Babylon all the way down to the toes. Now, we know that Yahusha was born under pagan Rome, and through his death, burial, and resurrection, he opened the door for our redemption and restored the Melchizedek priesthood back to its reigning position, and made the new covenant that we can enter into and become his kingdom of priests of every tongue, tribe, people, and nation. Because the Aaronic Levitical priesthood reigned and implemented the book of the law. And that was their tutor, that was their schoolmaster until is very important word, until Yahusha would come and restore the Melchizedek priesthood back to its reigning position, because the Melchizedek priesthood predated the Aaronic Levitical priesthood that was implemented after the sin of the golden calf. So this was just a review. The Beast Kingdom countdown actually, in my understanding, started with Egypt, though in the book of Daniel, it's starting with Babylon. But if we look at the beast kingdoms that had usurped the people of Israel and also the land, I would include Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. But remember that Rome had two legs. The western leg, like I said, heavy with the papal system, and the east leg was also Rome for a while, the Byzantine Empire, but then the Ottoman Empire conquered, and then that followed with the defeat of the Ottoman Empire and the Balfour Declaration, in a short summary. So presently, Mystery Babylon is manifesting. We have present day Israel, United Nations sanctioned Israel, that is in the land today, that many of the leadership follows the Babylonian Talmud and occupies the land. Now, there are true believers over there. There may be true and are true descendants, possibly direct descendants of the 12 tribes. But at this age, it's hard to determine who is who, because many of the records have been lost. But irregardless, even if you have blood lineage back to the 12 tribes, you still must come through the door of Yahusha HaMashiach to enter into the one new man, Israel, born from above. And the eighth, the future beast kingdom and beast man, will be Mystery Babylon, empowered by Satan. And we'll read about that beast that rises in Revelation 17. And we'll remember that the iron remains all the way down to the tippy toe. So we know Rome is involved, the papal system is involved. The clay is mankind, inclusive of the remnant of the true Israel born from above. And also the clay has several meanings, and I'll probably go over this again, but it could, the iron and clay could also be speaking or alluding to the transhumanism that we're seeing take place, the mixing of mankind with computer systems and doing CRISPR technology and splicing human DNA with other species. Our Elohim is not an Elohim of mixing. So when you think of this beast man system, remember, when you're speaking of the lower portion, there's 2 legs, there's 2 feet, and there's 5 toes each on each foot. So keep that in mind. So, because this is a worldly, global beast man, one world government that will evolve into a one world religion. So to your left, you have Esau, Edom, those that refuse to receive Yahusha HaMashiach as their savior. And the one new man, Israel, is reflected by Jacob, those saved by grace through faith in Yahusha with their robes washed in the blood of the Lamb. And that because of Yahusha restoring us and giving us the new covenant, he fulfilled the conditional arm of the promise to Abraham with the flaying of the animals, because if someone broke that covenant, someone would have to die. And he knew all along he was going to lay down his life. And because of that, that connected us back to the promise of Abraham in Genesis 12. And Yahweh said to Abram, go yourself out of your land, from your relatives and from your father's house, to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation and bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. So praise Yah. So the main thing I want us to remember is that at the fall of Adam and Eve, Yahweh already had a plan to redeem mankind, and he implemented it right then and there. Yes, Satan took the power to rule. It was seized by him through deception, but also Adam was the first preacher of righteousness, and through him it went on to create and fulfill the later promise to Abraham. Isaac gave Jacob a blessing, and that's recorded in Genesis 27. Therefore, Elohim, give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's son bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. And Isaac gave Esau a blessing below in Genesis 27, verse 39 and 40. And Isaac, his father, answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shall thou live, and shall serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. So for 42 months, the beast man, empowered by Satan, will break that yoke off of his neck, and that prophecy will be fulfilled right there. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. We saw that Satan seized the scepter from Adam and Eve to rule over the earth. Thus, the beast man and beast kingdom have manifested throughout time. Satan's Babylon beast kingdom hasn't changed, but its various earthly leaders and worshipers have come and gone. The full beast kingdom, the full statue of the synagogue of Satan, is still advancing and manifesting, but its time is drawing to a close. So here we see the many components of Mystery Babylon Beast Man Rising, from the deception in the garden, to Nimrod, to Esau selling his birthright, to Daniel's beast that are coalesced as the first beast in Revelation 13, to the second beast, the false prophet, also in Revelation 13, the conglomerate beast of both beasts of Revelation 13 make up the Revelation 17 beast. We know the dragon is Satan in the book of Revelation. And the Antichrist will rise, Apollyon, And for a short while, 10 kings will be given authority. In the beast kingdom, you also have mother goddess worship that we see mimicking the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet in this picture right here. And in the end of days, we'll see the battle between the ram and the he-goat, as previously also has been seen. So at times, the segments of the Babylonian statue are represented by beasts in various prophetic visions. I mean, so we start with this beast man in Daniel, but we saw them change into these kinds of beasts: the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dreadful beast, and the little horn. But then later they changed into the he-goat and the ram. So they take different shapes and form, but they're still reflective of Mystery Babylon, Beast Man Rising, and the synagogue of Satan. Now, these beasts, they are blended chimeric beasts. We have a lion with wings. We have a leopard with wings. So these are not normal animals. They are blended chimeric beast kingdoms who reside, rule, and reign over nations, peoples, and tongues. These components are those that practice witchcraft and sorcery, and they serve Satan. On the other hand, we have Israel, the one new man born from above, is also represented by animals, but these are not chimeras. They are the four living creatures. They are not beasts. They are living creatures. When we are born anew, it says, behold, all things are made new, and you become a new creation or a new creature. They symbolically represent Yahusha as the head and the four quadrants, like I mentioned earlier, of the Israel's wilderness tabernacle encampments. And they also, like I shared, appear in Revelation 4 and 5. As we get into Revelation 12, keep in mind that the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, that is crowned with 12 stars, represent multiple aspects of the bride and Israel. So many of these representations are essentially reflecting the one new man, Israel, born from above. And an example I can give you is like Miriam, the mother of Yahusha. She was the virgin bride, but she was also Yahusha's surrogate mother. And we know Yahusha's flesh and blood were from heaven. Therefore, he came in the likeness of flesh. Miriam's ovum was not involved, only her womb. Otherwise, we would have had another Gen 6 scenario. In pregnancy, the mother nourishes the child via the umbilical cord, but her blood does not mix with the fetus's blood. Miriam was not only Yahusha's mother, but she was also the virgin bride. And she is also part of Israel born from above. So when we look at the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, she fits in many categories, and I do not think we should just pick one. She's just like Miriam. Miriam was in several categories. So in essence, remember, these components are making up, on our screen right now, Israel born from above. Similarly, Yahusha is Yahweh in Son, but he is also our Savior. He is prophet. He is also our Melchizedek high priest. He is also the King of Kings. He is also our groom. He is also portrayed as the Lamb. He is also portrayed as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And he is also the head of the one new man, Israel, born from above. And we are the body, Colossians chapter 1, verse 18. The point is that Israel, the one new man, is one body with many members and roles, but we are one in him. So this symbology is breaking down some of the components, trying to tell the story about the final remnant in Revelation 12, in which the dragon goes to make war with the remnant of the woman's seed as we get further into Revelation 12. So the war has been won, but the battle still is coming. What can we expect? Well, we can expect similar challenges, as did the Israelites in the last 14 campsites. I will emphasize the last few campsites, showing how close the Israelites were to the promised land, yet how many failed to cross over because they had a great falling away and they were so close. A great falling away. Sound familiar? So what happened? When Balaam was unable to curse the Israelites, King Balak resorted to seducing the Israelites. There's nothing new under the sun. Just looking at the last three campsites, campsite 40 was Abram, entailed sexual sin, seducing spirits of Jezebel and Delilah. Campsite 41, Moab. We recall the passionate and zealous Phinehas that turned the tide back to favor with Elohim after there was sexual sin in the camp with the Moabites. Others, zealous for Yahweh, shifted from their comfy role of following Moses the shepherd to following Joshua the warrior. They exchanged the comfort of the shepherd's rod to the warrior's sword. And I want to prepare us to make that same shift, because I believe that is what Yahweh is bringing to our attention. Yes, we want to go through the book of Revelation, but right now we're living it. Right now we're living it. And I want us to be prepared because he wants us to be prepared. He wants us to be successful. He wants us to be zealous as Phinehas was. Campsite 42 is Abel Shittim. That is where the sealing of the saints and possessing the land occurs. We see the type and antitype between Moses and Yahusha. We remember that Moses was a shepherd. He learned to shepherd sheep at the age of 40 in Midian. His first 40 years, however, existed in the palace of Pharaoh. Now, the Egyptians considered shepherds unclean, so Moses did not learn his shepherding skills there for sure. He learned his shepherding skills once he ran away and went to Midian. After Midian, he later became the shepherd of the Israelites out of Egypt for 40 years in the wilderness. His life was segmented into 40, 40, and 40, 120 years, which is significant. So he had 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, he had 40 years in Midian, and he had 40 years in the wilderness. Moses was a type and shadow of Yahusha, the good shepherd. Yahusha came to set the captives free. Ultimately, he is our Jubilee. In addition, we see the type and antitype between Joshua and Yahusha. Joshua, the warrior, takes up the leadership in the book of Joshua, and Yahusha is revealed as conqueror in the book of Revelation. Yahusha, he is our kinsman redeemer, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the only one worthy to open the seven sealed scroll to not only redeem us, but to redeem all of creation. We know all creation moans, and to redeem his land, the promised land. The land is his. He holds the deed. Before Moses' death, he poured Yah's wisdom into the next generation of Israelites. He reminded them of what caused failure in the previous generations: disobedience and hard hearts. Like all generations, they would be tested. Would they pass or fail? Would they fall short of the finish line? In volume 3 of the Call to Canaan, symbolically, we too will pass through the final land of Moab and be tested. Are we truly born anew of the seed of faith and belong to Yahweh as Abraham's seed? Galatians 3, verse 29. Or will our attitudes and decisions reveal that we have belonged to the father of lies? The question is, who really is your father? Who is your daddy? Who will you take a stand for? Do you follow Yah's Moedim or men's holidays? Because know this, Yah's Moedims, that's our wedding rehearsals. That's when Yahweh acts and moves. Do we not know his Moedim? Are we so focused on men's holidays that we haven't even learned Yah's Moedims? Wake up. Time is short. The end of days will reveal our faithfulness. Like the Israelites then, they were caught off guard with the warm reception and friendship posed by the Moabites. The journey had been long and hard, and now it appeared they could celebrate with these kind and welcoming people. Wrong. As a comparison in our present day, it may go something like this. What? Not celebrate Christmas and Easter? Why, it's tradition. It's tradition, all right, but it's not of Yah. It is pagan. It is pagan. There's nothing new under the sun. His word is truth. His word is our instruction manual. Have you read it? As then, danger will come at us in the form of acceptance, friendship, and good cheer, along with the hope to return to the familiar spirits of normalcy. But we should know for certain that we, like the Israelites then, will not finish our journey in ease and comfort. In James 4:4, it tells us, adulterers, adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim? Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. Now I'd like to share a quote from Call to Canaan, Volume 3 by Danette Davis and Shauna Manfordine from page 242. The fact that Balak regarded devil curses as his highest line of defense speaks volumes about their value of witchcraft as believed and practiced by these people of Moab and their neighbors. It also gives a loud warning to us on the revelation edge of the promised inheritance. We are on the revelation edge of the promised inheritance. We must not falter. Today, like Israel in Moab, most Christians ignore the dangers of witchcraft, which are stealthily gaining entrance into positions of power. Yahusha despises the practices of Balaam. Balaam means one who destroys. Sound familiar? Like the abomination that desolates? Balaam was the son of Beor. Beor means burning. Strong delusions will occur in the end of days, and Yah wants us to be prepared for such. I believe it is Yah's desire that while studying the book of Revelation, we prepare to rebuke such practices and any apparitions that may appear. These will be strong, seducing spirits. We must possess the zealousness of Phinehas as we claim the blood of Yahusha and the word of our testimony. Dwight L. Moody had this to say about familiar spirits. There is another passage which reads, and I'm going to read that same scripture, but from the scriptures 2009, Isaiah chapter 8, verse 19 at the top of the screen. And when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their Elohim? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living? And then we continue with what he wrote here. What is but table wrapping and cabinet hiding? You know, sleight of hands, if you will. If it was a message from Elohim, do you think you would have to go into a dark room and put out all the lights? In secret, my master taught nothing. Elohim is not in that movement. And what we want as children of Elohim is to keep ourselves from this evil. And then notice the verse following, quoted so often out of its connection. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Any man, any woman who comes to us with any doctrine that is not according to the law and the testimony, let us understand that they are from the evil one and that they are enemies of righteousness. They have no light in them. So what type of strong delusion do we need to be prepared for? What would we do if faced with familiar spirits? In Revelation chapter 13, verse 13 through 15, it reads, and he does great signs so that he even makes fire come down from the heaven on the earth before men. And he leads astray those dwelling on the earth because of those signs which he was given to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword, yet lived. And there was given to him to give spirit. What? And there was given to him to give spirit to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not worship the image of the beast. Through witchcraft, life-like manifestations of the dead can be achieved and even filled with familiar spirits. One day, evil will demand that such an image be worshiped? In the book of Daniel, we saw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, otherwise known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were zealous for Yah and did not bow. They did not bow down to the image. May we follow their example. Because out of all the people that bowed down, they were the only three that didn't. And it is believed that Daniel was off on business, and that's why he wasn't there at that time. Now, I would like to share the following account that I shared on Shabbat, and that particular recording messed up. So I'd like to share it with all of you tonight because I believe it is a message that we need to hear. And this is a story we need to comprehend, knowing that these things happen. And I'm going to read it from volume 3, Called to Canaan, on page 261 and 263, because this reflects these questions. What type of strong delusions do we need to be prepared for? What would we do if faced with a familiar spirit? And then after this account, I want us to view another clip I shared on Shabbat with an interview of L.A. Marzulli with Lisa Haven that focuses on a similar topic. Because honestly, what I feel Yah is telling us, he wants us to be prepared. He wants us to take up the sword of his word and prepare for battle and not be caught off guard. So this is the story. In spite of the strong warning to us found in the story of Balaam and Israel, Christians still seem to believe they can fellowship with the world and enjoy its delights while remaining pure for Yahweh. Such dangerous blindness is no less serious today than it was for Israel on the edge of the Canaan land. There is nothing that can remove the protective shield of the Almighty from the lives of his people except their own choice to dance with the devil. How often folks think they can just dance, they can waltz, but your friendly enemy never stops until you're entangled in the full tango. About 40 years ago, a dramatic story from the Amazon missions took place, which stands out as an illustration of the cleverness of witchcraft used to entrap Christians today. A young couple in mission service had lost both of their children to a fever rampant among the Amazon villages. It was a devastating loss to the young missionary couple, which filled the father's thoughts with doubts. Although he did not express these thoughts to others, they came to their fatal fruition when he attended a village church. The missionary had made an agreement with a dignified villager who promised to attend the missionary's religious meetings if he would repay the favor by visiting the villager's church. The missionary thought it was a fair arrangement and believed he might convert the village businessman. After all, the young Christian was certain that he could, quote unquote, handle whatever doctrinal errors he might encounter at the villager's church. Blindly, the missionary thought he was in control, while he really had a deadly date on the devil's ground. In the villager's church, the missionary enjoyed the wonderful music and Vespers talk. Then the minister, quote unquote, announced that he had a special surprise for a visitor in the audience. Suddenly, without warning, What appeared to be the missionary's two children came running down the aisle with arms outstretched in joyful excitement to see their father. "Daddy, Daddy," the children cried, flying into the arms of the overwhelmed missionary father. The Seventh-day Adventist missionary knew these were not his real children. He was fully aware that they were demonic apparitions, which looked like, sounded like, and felt like his own two deceased children, for whom he had so deeply grieved. Instead of rebuking Satan and fleeing the demonic setup, he embraced it, letting his emotions override the truth. He held them close, denying the reality of what he knew were seducing spirits. This is the essence of witchcraft. It always leads one's emotions to overpower mental truth and to put one's heart over one's head. The man lost his salvation in that moment and switched sides from being the servant of Elohim to the captive of hell. Without telling his wife, the missionary father returned nightly to the satanic village church, just so that he could hold his children, quote unquote. He had joined his heart to seducing spirits of devils, and he knew it. Yet he refused to resist the enemy, choosing instead to indulge his perceived emotional need. This is the very kind of scenario which Israel faced in Moab, and which Christians face now in these last days. The men of Israel knew they shouldn't worship the idols of the Moabite women. They did it for the pleasure of seductively promised sexual favors. This is the same magnitude of onslaught we are warned will come to every child of Yahweh, taking out many on the very borders of eternity. Mark 13, verse 22, "For false Christ and false prophets shall arise and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect." Let me repeat that. Mark 13, verse 22. "For false Christ and false prophets shall rise." Not maybe, they shall rise and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. If you would escape the wiles of Balaam, let the first overture to compromise be your signal to flee for your life. Let us learn by the mistakes of Israel in Moab. Now let's listen to this interview with L.A. Marzulli and Lisa Haven.
Hi everyone, Lisa Haven here, and I've got a mega report to share with you guys. I am bringing on UFO researcher, speaker, and author, and one of my favorite authors, by the way, L.A. Marzulli. He's got so much information to share with you about UFO disclosure. As most of you know, we are nearing the 180-day countdown for our U.S. government agencies to release what they know about UFOs. So I thought, who better to bring on to the broadcast who is someone on the inside of what's going on with the UFOs and really dives into the question, what are they and why are they here? So LA, are you with me over there?
I certainly am, Lisa. Thanks for having me on again. Always good to be here.
Yes, as you know, you are my favorite author. I read like your entire, I've seen your whole video collection on Trail on the Nephilim and all of that. So I really love what you do. So I am super excited that you are here. But with that, if you guys want to check him out, you can find his website on lamarzulli.net. I'll leave a link in the description box below. He also has a free video, zero charge to watch it. It's amazing. And it's called UFO Disclosure. I'll also leave a link to that below. But LA, let's start with the big question. What do you think the U.S. government is going to release here in a couple of days? Maybe they're releasing it now. We don't know, but they're supposed to release it by the 25th. What do you think they're going to tell us? Anything, or will it be a big nothing burger?
I'm voting for nothing burger. It'll basically be the Texas two-step. They'll give us, F-18 stuff. We know that it's real. Maybe they'll have some still photographs. And then they'll go, we're really not sure exactly what we're looking at. And they've already kind of hinted that that's where they're going to go. So on one hand, they'll say, well, the phenomenon is real, but we don't know what this is, which is nonsense. They know exactly what this is, and they are in league and have been in bed with these entities literally for decades. How do I know that? We've had whistleblowers come forth, and we've interviewed them. I believe their stories, and so they're rolling it out very slowly. What would be really cool is if they pointed to something like Roswell and said, we tried covering this up for 70 years plus, but we're coming out now and saying that Roswell was a real crashed event. It was a real UFO event. It was a crashed UFO, and we've covered it up. And mea culpa, mea culpa. We're really sorry we did that to the American people. But so here's some pictures. All is well. It'd be really cool if they did something like that. I'm not holding my breath. I think it's the basic Texas two-step, typical Washington doublespeak, where they'll say, once again, the phenomenon is real, but we really don't know what it is, which is nonsense.
I agree 100% because I've read some of the stuff that they released, or the New York Times talked about what they could possibly release, and some of the committees that they've had via our congressional leaders, our leaders here in the U.S. who have been briefed on it. And based off of what they say, I agree 100%. And it's just so frustrating because we know that they know more than they're going to let the American people in on, right? So, but I do think sometime in the future, I don't think via this release that sometime we're going to find out something. Now, here's a big question to you. What are, for those who may not know, what do you think the UFO are and what are they after?
Well, what's amazing about this, they've just released the tip of the iceberg with all this stuff. They talk about the tic-tac shaped UFO, and that was recorded earlier, over a decade ago, I believe. But it was released on Tucker Carlson's show, the actual photograph and stuff, in December of 2017, which that was the beginning of the disclosure ladder, as I call it. Since then, it's been going up and up and up. They're kind of rolling it out very slowly. The question is, why now? But notice that they're just peeling back the first layer. Okay, here's the craft. It's flying around. Here's some pictures. Here's a fuzzy UFO. I mean, we've already got pictures, which we've shown in our Watchers film, and I actually show it in the Disclosure film, Disclosure, The Coming Great Deception, The Luciferian Endgame. We show that clip, which is the Kumburgaz UFO, which guess what? Not only has the UFO in it, and it's the best, I think, the best UFO footage I've ever seen, because not only are we seeing the craft, but we're seeing the occupants in the craft, and they are the Greys. So something is going on, and most people have only seen the first layer. We're so far down the rabbit hole with abductions, with implants, with crop circles, with the creation of a hybrid entity. These are the days of Noah. These are not extraterrestrial beings, in my opinion. They are interdimensional entities, which are, their whole agenda is to create a hybrid race. Dr. David Jacob, who I've interviewed numerous times, he's sort of on the decline right now, which is very unfortunate. But before that happened, Jacobs wrote a book called Walking Amongst Us, where he talks about that the hybrid, and he's been following this for decades, just like I have, that the hybrids now, these human so-called alien, which are not alien. Well, let me define that before we move on. Alien is anything off-world. If you come from Venus, you're an alien. If you're from another dimension, you're an alien. So anything not originating on this earth is by definition an alien. So when I say alien, that can include interdimensional entities, which is what I think we're looking at. These are not extraterrestrial, they're interdimensional. So Dr. Jacobs has been following this for decades, just like I have. And we know that they are very, very interested, these entities, wherever they're from, whoever they are obsessed with creating some sort of a hybrid being. And we've had reports from people that have encounters with these hybrid entities. In fact, in the film Disclosure, Al Matthews had an encounter with a woman, Diane Kelly, who, in my opinion, was a hybrid. She goes to kiss him, and this whole thing is bizarre. Spoiler alert! But she goes to kiss him, and he pushes her away, and her eyes go reptilian. They completely shapeshift, and in the whites they go all yellow. And up till that point, she wore these dark glasses, almost like swimmer goggles. They were obviously very special, that wrapped around her head, which wouldn't allow any light in. That's earlier in the interview with Al. So much later on in that interview, he goes up to where she lives. She's with a friend, and she takes the glasses off and she goes to kiss him. And that's when all things go south. And that's when he came running to me via Gordy Tong up in Canada. And I counseled with him and talked with him for probably an hour that night. We sent him a bunch of literature. And that's when he gave his life to Jesus. And that's when the abductions, he's a lifelong abductee. We talk about that. So the public knows this much of the UFO puzzle, which is very nefarious, very dark, and it has an agenda. And that is to create a human-alien hybrid, which then can interface in the world. And we're already seeing it. We've had reports from people.
So that would be more of a end time Bible prophecy sort of thing,
Exactly.
which I've talked about here a lot. So this is a satanic agenda, if you will, for what specifically?
Well, this is why we call it the coming great deception and the Luciferian endgame. Why would former President Barack Hussein Obama, out of all the things he could talk about, right, in light of the UFO disclosure, Obama goes, there's going to be new religions. How can he make a statement like that? How does he know there's going to be new religions? I mean, what does he know that we don't know? And why is it at the top of his list? New religions, and then we're going to see the military expand their budget. Okay, so he's on the inside track, at least in some way. So look, what people need to understand, and this is why we released the film for free, Lisa, is because I call it the coming great deception. I believe that the church is taken out before the full revealing. But the bottom line is we're already seeing so much stuff. We don't know how long we're going to be here before that happens. We're already seeing it. I never thought I'd live to see the day, but we are. It's happening as I speak. And it's in all forms of media. It's not just George Norrie anymore, coast to coast. I was on his show a week ago, last Monday. And, George, I said, George, this thing's coming down. And it's no longer, tinfoil hat conspiracy people. But people like George and you and myself are so far down the rabbit hole, we know about the other agenda. So Obama's talking about new religions. I've been banging this drum for decades, that when they show up, the religions of the world will in fact fall of their own weight. They will collapse. Why? Because so-called ET, which are interdimensional entities, i.e. fallen angels, posing as extraterrestrials, they will say that we, ET, created all life on this planet, that we started the world's, we genetically manipulated early man, we jump-started the world's religions, kick-started the world's civilizations. Now, at this critical juncture in human history, we're back to usher mankind into a golden age. I'm not making this stuff up. I heard this literally 45 years ago when I was involved in the New Age, before I was a Christian. I've only been a Christian 41 years. So 45 years ago, in New Age circles, all this was being bandied about. That when they showed up, certain people would be lifted off the planet who weren't ready for the paradigm shift. There's actually a Hollywood TV show talking about something like 100 million people vanished from the earth. Gee, what does that sound like? They're already promulgating it, for crying out loud. So this new religion, which I believe will be the religion that we hear about, the one world global government, the one world global religion, will have its roots and underpinnings in the whole so-called ET agenda.
Now, when do you think that I mean, nobody knows when, but do you think the government will end up disclosing it? Well, like we've already referenced, we don't think they're going to release much or a nothing burger in the next couple of days. But that aside, in the future, do you think that it will be disclosed via governments of the world, or they'll just make themselves known? How do you foresee that going?
I think when disclosure happens, it will be, what we saw with COVID-19, the Wuhan flu, right? Whatever you want to call it. The entire planet in lockstep shut everything down. Never seen anything like that before. That's a precursor to what we're looking at. When they show up, Lisa, everything changes. Life as we know it will be referred to before they came and after they arrived. That's how it will be. It will change everything and do so radically. The religions of the world, and I'm not making this stuff up, Stephen Bassett's been banging this drum for a long time. The religions of the world will just crumble. They'll fall to their own weight because ET will tell us, this is what they'll tell us, that they created Jesus. They created Buddha, Mohammed, Krishna. That's what they're going to say. They'll have holographic film of the crucifixion. How do I know that? Because we've talked to people that have seen it. Abductees who have been taken aboard the ship have seen, allegedly, holographic film of the crucifixion and then the resurrection. They've seen that. Of course, it's not what we believe. The grays are all over this thing. And, Jesus is one of theirs, as it were, which is why he could do all those miracles. I mean, they're gonna flip everything like this. And what they'll tell us is, well, we couldn't really come forward because you guys were too primitive. But now, the Industrial Revolution, and here you are. It's the atomic age, and you're ready. You're ready to become part of the galactic community. Welcome to the coming Great Deception. And they'll have two things. And you've heard me talk about this at conferences. How many years does this go back? They'll have two things. They'll have the free energy, which pilots the craft, and they'll have this little implant, which you'll take on your back of your hand or on your forehead, which will change your DNA. So you'll live 300 to 500 years with absolutely no diseases at all. And they'll couch it as a DNA upgrade. And it will be mandatory for everyone to take the mark. How do I know that? Because we've taken out the implant. We had a guy who was abducted numerous times from 5 years old to 45. We did the surgery. We're the only Christian team that's ever done this. It was patient number 17, Dr. Roger Lear, his protocol. We did x-rays, CAT scans, ultrasounds, the whole 9 yards. It's all in the best of watchers. And I'm making part 2 to this film. We're going to show some of that in part 2. Because again, we need to educate people that you think UFOs are real, you have no idea of the nefarious agenda that they have planned. Cattle mutilations, implants, the hybridization, this human alien hybrid. They're already walking amongst us, according to David Jacobs, who was a secular researcher, who doesn't have the biblical foundation like we do.
And all of this, like the mark of the beast, that was spoken of in Bible prophecy, things that were warned, years before the technology even existed today. So I find that absolutely fascinating, especially from our Christian perspective, because much of it is in line with the Bible and Bible prophecy. And that's why I like what you do, because you really dive into the questions that no one's asking or wants to ask or dares to ask or gives you the label of conspiracy theorist or whatever. And today that's the case. I think there's more and more evidence coming out in public. We know Tucker Carlson did an entire episode on it. We've had the former, FBI director, I'm blanking on his name. Was it the FBI director come out and talk about?
CIA. It was, yeah. I know who you mean. I can't think of the guy's name either.
Like, it's on the tip of my tongue, but he came out as...
Right. Yeah, no, he said the same thing. He said that the phenomenon is real.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information that has been leaked, and you were years before any of this stuff started coming out, because you've been one of the first people. You, Steve Quayle, and people like you guys have so much amazing information on all of that. In a nutshell, I guess you've got that disclosure video. Or let me ask you this, maybe a different direction. Have you yourself ever experienced UFO or seen UFO? I know that you interview thousands of people who have had experience, probably even more than that by now. But have you ever had any experiences?
I had my first when I was 12 years old, which was a game changer for me. It changed my life. It showed me that there's something called herd mentality. So I'm at Boy Scout camp. I'm about 12 years old. 4 of us are walking up this ravine, boulder to boulder. It's a dry creek bed because we're taking a shortcut to get up to the campsite for lunch. We're hungry Boy Scouts. We're 12 years old, right? What can I tell you? So we're all in single file like this. And the lead guy goes, oh my gosh, what's that? And the other two guys go, wow, what is that? And I go, where? And they point there. And I look up. It's the classic silver disc, Lisa. The classic silver disc. And the sun is glinting off of it. And it's just hovering there noiselessly. And all of a sudden it goes, fweek, shoots straight up. You could follow it, but like in a second, it's gone. Just shot straight up into the air. We go running back. We saw a UFO. We saw a flying saucer. The entire scout troop huddles around us with the scout and masters. And we're telling them what we saw. And we're all excited, as 12-year-old boys get, right? And that was at lunchtime. By the evening meal, the other three boys denied they had ever seen anything. Why? Because of the ridicule. Because of the ridicule. And they denied that they had seen anything. And I stuck to my story. I was called every name in the book. That was my first one. The second one is when my wife and I are driving on Pacific Coast Highway after a wonderful Italian dinner at Spruzzo's, which is right on the coast, overlooking the ocean. So we're driving up Pacific Coast Highway. She's driving. I'm in the passenger seat. And I go, wow, what's that? And she goes, oh, it's probably a plane. Because when planes come at you, there's this big light. And I go, I'm looking at this thing going like, I don't think it's a plane. No, it's not a plane. It's not a plane, because this thing's just hovering, just sitting there. There's just a light in the sky. All of a sudden, here's the light. All of a sudden, above it, boom, another light appears and slowly descends into the big light. And then the big light breaks up in the concentric rings like this and vanishes. And I looked at my wife. I said, oh my gosh, we're not in Kansas anymore. Did you see that? And we pulled over on the side of the road, and all of a sudden, boom, it came back again. It did this 3 times. And from that, the Lord, the Spirit of a living God, got me up that morning at 3 o'clock in the morning and basically gave me a spanking. And basically the spanking was, took me to the woodshed and said, what are you doing, LA? You know, you're the one that's flailing their arms, warning people of the coming great deception. And here you are, you see something in the sky, and you stop the car and get out and look at it. Rebuke first, ask questions later. His saying, not mine. Rebuke first, ask questions later. And you've heard me say that before at conferences. When we see something like that, it'll suck us in completely. But what we need to do is rebuke first, ask questions later.
Awesome. Well, what would you encourage people to amid everything that's going on with all the information that they're inundated with in regards to UFOs, this coming releasal of the report? What would you encourage people to do now?
Watch the film Disclosure. Let your family see it. Give it to your pastor, rabbi, priest, imam, whatever. Watch the film. Arm yourself. Understand what's going on. When you watch this film, and at the very end of the film, after the credits, there's a little thing I say, a little call to Jesus, and people have talked about that, but it's not overly religious, and it's at the end of the credits, so you can either watch it or not watch it. I did that deliberately, but you can invite your friends over, pass it forward. Look, it's free. It's free. I can't do any more than that. We're working on part 2, which has even more information. So that's how important I think this is, which is why we released the film for free, Lisa, because, oh my gosh, it's coming down. The church is asleep, or at best, ambivalent. At worst, completely asleep, at best, ambivalent. It's time to get the word out. We've done the homework. We've done the work, so you don't have to. Watch the film, pass it forward.
And I'm going to leave all the information for that video in the description box below. It's found on the direct link is streaming.lamarzulli.net. But I've got a direct link in the description box below. So make sure you click that. And LA, if people want to contact you, check out your YouTube channel or your website, how can they go about doing that?
That's just lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. You have ways of contacting me via email if you've got a story.
All right. So that was very insightful about what may manifest interdimensionally in our atmosphere, and to remember to rebuke first, ask questions later, and don't get sucked in to the signs and sorcery magic that will be taking place. Like the Israelites about to cross over the Jordan, we too are on the revelation edge of the promised inheritance. We're on that very edge. The final encampment was a place of ultimate cleansing and division, separating the chaff from the wheat in type. This is signified in the dual references to this camp location. This campsite is the last campsite, and it's our pattern. This campsite is number 42, and it's denoted as from Beth Jezimoth unto Abel Shittim. So on the map, you see Beth Jezimoth here to Abel Shittim, and you see the river Jordan that runs right alongside it. In Numbers 33, it references the plains of Moab and this side of the Jordan are both phrases that describe the same physical location. It's just that there were like several million people, so they just stretched out that far, but it was the same physical location, as are the references to the region from Beth Jezimoth unto Abel Shittim. But while these terms are pinpointing the same location, each identifies a very different connotation. In short, the phrase plains of Moab connotes the land of Moab, and this side of the Jordan associates with the land of Israel. This places it in context with the rest of Israel, the ones that will prevail with El, lying toward the west. Plains of Moab is a phrase which symbolizes those who are lost in immorality and idolatry. They receive, sadly, the mark of the beast. This side of the Jordan is a phrase that symbolizes those who will be among the final Israel, the redeemed, who receive the seal of the living Elohim. In the last campsite, the multitude were stretched out along the river Jordan, which was from Beth Jezimoth all the way to Abel Shittim. Beth Jezimoth means house of desolation or ruin, and Abel Shittim means meadows of the acacia, as in the wood used for the Ark of the Covenant was acacia wood, as well as the thorns that encircled Yahusha's brow. They were thorns from the acacia tree. So the multitude were stretched out all along the Jordan River between these two locations, but it's considered one location. Our position in the end of time is going to determine whether we pass or fail as we reach that revelation edge of the promised inheritance. Some will succumb, sadly, they'll succumb and they'll receive the mark of the beast. Others will be zealous and stand firm like Phineas and be sealed with the name of Yahweh, Yahusha, on their forehead. As mentioned before, all must enter through the door, Yahusha. He's told us, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. John 10, verse 9. And in Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, we read in that letter to Pergamum that Yahusha said, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name, which no one knows except him who receives it. Historically, the white stone indicated a token of innocence. A white pebble was placed in a ballot box by an appointed judge or judges, pronouncing a sentence of acquittal or innocence. A black pebble indicated condemnation, guilt. But this verdict was known to all, but by the verse in chapter 2, verse 17, where he says, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name, which no one knows except him who receives it. So this stone is known, and the name is known only to him who receives it. Well, based on the amount of time we have already, it's almost 9 o'clock. I'm going to have to close now, and we'll go ahead and take some comments in Q&A, and then we'll pick up from this point next week.
What would you say the takeaway for this evening would be? I have him watching. He's watching with me, my brother-in-law,
Right.
Don, his name is. And so what would be the takeaway for this evening?
The takeaway is that the beast man is rising. It's coalescing. We are in the feet of the beast man rising, and it's getting close to the end of time. But at the same time, Yahweh has always had a plan, and that plan was Israel born from above, the one new man, and with Yahusha as the head and we are the body. So when that child is birthed in Revelation 12, Yahusha is the head, we are the body. We are many members in one. We are one in him. And the other thing is that knowing that we are the remnant of Israel here on this planet, that we are during the time period of the feet and the iron and the clay, knowing that we were so close to entering that promised land, to learn, we will know the end from the beginning and learn from the 42 campsites of the Israelites in the wilderness, because right there, they were so close. They could even see the promised land. And they were so, that acronym HALT, anytime you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, they were all of the above. And they let their guard down. They saw these pretty women. They saw the flesh pots. They saw the wine. They saw the friendly welcome, and they got sucked in, fell into sexual sin, and plague entered the camp. And so, but they were so close, but they let their guard down, and they started worshiping the idols of these Moabite women. And so the message is, we need to stay alert. We need to know who our Father is. And many proclaim to have Yahweh, but you can't tell it from what they practice, because they have not diligently studied his word, and they're still messing around with obelisk Christmas trees and fertility goddess Easter eggs under bushes. They're still lying to their children, even though that's one of the 10 commandments and part of our covenant Torah. So time is short. It's time to wake up. It's time to really make sure who your Father is and who you are following, and to what kingdom do you belong. That is the message tonight, because those are the two, that's the battle in the book of Revelation between the beast man rising and Israel's one new man.